It's Tuesday, September 30th, 2025, and you are listening to Matters of Policy and Politics, a Hoover Institution podcast devoted to governance and the balance of power here in America and around the free world. I'm Jonathan Mavroidis. I'm sitting in the chair of Bill Whalen, the Virginia Hobbs Carpenter Distinguished Policy Fellow in Journalism, so that he can answer questions and provide commentary about California policy and politics in which he is well versed. Bill Whalen, in addition to being a Washington Post columnist, writes for Hoover's California On Your Mind web channel. Whalen is joined today by Lee Ohanian, Hoover Institution Senior Fellow and Professor of Economics and the Director of the Edinger Family Program in Macroeconomic Research at the University of California, Los Angeles. Ohanian also writes about the policy environment of the Golden State for California On Your Mind. Good day, gentlemen. Let's talk about the latest developments in policy and politics in the Golden State. The last time we recorded, gentlemen, in August, the legislature was finalizing Proposition 50 for the November 4th special election. So let's pick up where we left off, the main theme here being the uncertainty of it all. In August, Emerson College poll shows 51% to 34% favoring the upcoming ballot measure. However, ballot measures have historically started high and finished low at the time of the election. Bill, do you have a prognosis for Proposition 50?
My short and smart answer is if I do, Jonathan, I would collect all our money and hop a plane to some country where you can bet on this stuff and make a killing. No, it's really it's Prop 50 and it's kind of a 50-50 proposition in this regard. It's a special election, and a note to Californians who may be getting tired of politics right now. This is our fifth statewide election now in the last 6 years, if you include this special election on November 4th and then the recall effort against Governor Newsom back in 2021. So 5 out of 6. So forgive California for being a little tired of politics right now, but a hard one to predict because it's a special election. So we don't know what the turnout model will be. So that makes polling a little tricky, which makes pollsters decide, should we go for likely voters or registered voters? And that could change numbers. The 51-34 number you mentioned, Jonathan, is intriguing because it does show majority support. But as you mentioned, initiatives start high and tend to finish low. So maybe there is a sort of a skeptical rush at the end and kills the thing. And then messaging, which I want to get into here in a few minutes. Both sides are making a very calculated risk here on the yes on 50 side. The yes campaign is the one that wants to redesign California's congressional districts, add 5 more Democratic seats. Their message is pretty much entirely anti-Donald Trump, anti-MAGA. Maybe a potent message in a state where Donald Trump has never received 40% of the statewide vote. The no side, a little complicated because there's not one no campaign, but a couple of no campaigns, and their messaging sort of is all over the map, if you will. So Lee and Jonathan, just kind of a big roll of the dice come November 4th. Who knows? Maybe Lee knows.
Well, yeah, who knows? I was going to say I'm two minds on this. I think I've changed. I'm one mind on this. I wish it wasn't happening because this biggest state in the country and it's going to be completely and blatantly gerrymandered with the potential to go to 48 out of 52 House seats to be Democrat. And this is not a partisan issue. It's just an issue about making sure people have a reasonable set of representation. Last general election, I believe close to 40% voted for Trump in California, believe it or not. Those 40% should have more of a voice than 8% of the House seats. Bill, I've seen some at least I believe 2 interviews with Schwarzenegger. Do you see him politically? Do you see him being able to move the needle on this? Because the money being raised, it looks like it's much more money being raised on the yes side than on the no side.
Yeah, so I do have some numbers on the money. This is last week, so not entirely fresh, but relatively fresh. The yes side, Governor Newsom's side, Lee, they've raised about $77 million. The no side, the 2 no campaigns combined, about $35 million. Lee, and $30 million of that comes from Charles Munger Jr. For those not in California who don't know who Mr. Munger is, he is a physicist here at Stanford University, and he is the namesake son of Charles Munger Sr., who is the famed investor at Berkshire Hathaway. Mr. Munger puts money into California politics on occasion. He put a lot of money into the original redistricting plan back in 2008, which created the Independent Redistricting Commission, which Proposition 50 is now putting on a hold. So think about this for a second. You have this Democratic power play in California. You have Republicans who desperately want to hold on to the House of Representatives, which is what is driving this train, because what California is doing is a counter to what Texas is doing, which is trying to take away 5 Democratic seats in their mid-decade gerrymander. But yet you only see $5 million outside of Charlie Munger being raised. So what's going on here? One thing that's going on, Kevin McCarthy, the former Speaker of the House from Bakersfield, California, said he would raise $100 million to kill this. The last I checked, he's raised about $5 million. And so it's, that just might be politics, the quid pro quo of politics. What can a former speaker, former member of Congress do for you in return for giving money? So the Yes campaign has the money advantage, but money doesn't necessarily buy you love, to steal the line from the Beatles. To translate into California politics. I can point you to initiatives galore that have outspent like crazy, but have also lost, as you will. The Arnold Schwarzenegger question fascinates me because he was California's governor, left office in 2011, has not really been deeply involved in California politics. Lee and Jonathan, he's been more involved in national politics in terms of tone and tenor of Republicans in the era of Trump. But now here he is diving into a California matter. And why is that? Because it was under his watch that we created the Independent Redistricting Commission. It's a big deal in the Arnold legacy world, the people versus the powerful, yada, yada, yada. And you see him on TV now. But if you look inside polls, when you ask Californians about Arnold, the Emerson poll, the Emerson College poll, the one that showed a 51-34 race, 66% of Californians said that Arnold doesn't really move the needle for them. That doesn't speak well to his stature right now, 15 years out of office, but it's maybe not a quantity but a quality argument, Lee and Jonathan. Maybe he can move those independents who the no campaign needs, or maybe he can pull a few Democrats aside. So so this is yet another angle on this, which Prop 50, which fascinates. It's a question of Governor Newsom's attractiveness, since he is a star of the Yes ads, and it's a question of Arnold Schwarzenegger's lasting legacy in California.
Oh yeah, it's interesting. Newsom is really the face of this, and
Yeah.
it seems obvious that this is an avenue for him to think about 2028. There's a YouGov poll, it's recent, just 4 weeks ago, that was a national poll. The sample size was not huge. So that's, so treat this statistic I'm going to give you with some caution, but his unfavorable was at -10. So this is a special election. Like primary, special elections attract those on the extremes. You can look at what happened in New York City in the mayoral race. We've got Mamdani, who, in my opinion, should not be on the ballot, but I think that's because the extremes came out to vote. So I suspect it'll be the same thing here. I'm curious as to what the turnout will be. This has changed in the state constitution, so I hope people do look at this carefully. But the more I look at California, and Bill, I've done this over the years now, I really worry about voter engagement and just how seriously voters are considering the ballot propositions that they're looking at. But this is changing the constitution. This is blatant gerrymandering.
Right.
I sometimes think, what would happen if the federal court who's evaluating the lawsuit in Texas, if the Texas redistricting was overturned? I wonder what would California do, and I suspect that it would just continue to do this. It was Arnold's baby. I think it was an exceptional. I think from all perspectives, whatever party you're in, I think it was the right thing to do back in the day. And I worry very much about the state and how this will evolve and what people will think about the state in terms of democratic representation if this does get passed. I'm gonna, if I was a betting man right now, I would bet against it, just because it is such a major change. It's a constitutional change. And the old saw, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think a lot of voters are probably in that category, but it's hard for me to say. I hope it doesn't pass, just from the standpoint that it seems ridiculous to have a state that would be literally 92.3% Democratic representation. And I would say the same thing if the tables were turned and it was the other party involved.
Right. Keep in mind, Lee and Jonathan, when we talk about turnout in California, this is not your mom and dad's election in this regard. We have gone to all mail ballots in California. So this is not like an election of 25 years ago where you'd think, oh my gosh, this is going to rain on election day. Are people give it the polls, things like that. Today, September the 30th. By October the 4th, you should be receiving a ballot in the mail. So you have, in theory, a month to vote on this thing. So it's a question of civic engagement, which gets back to what I'm fascinated with, the messaging thing. How angry are Californians with Donald Trump? How do they see red like the National Democratic Party, and whatever comes out of Donald Trump's mouth has to be wrong, and he is a threat to democracy? This is fascism, yada, yada, yada. You guys have all heard this ad nauseum by now. So are Californians so motivated in their dislike of Donald Trump that Gavin Newsom could get 50% plus one of the people who vote on November 4th to go his way? I wrote a column for California Mind a couple of weeks ago, and did offer this thought, Lee, which gets into what you just suggested. A very bad word to see in California ballot measures is the word temporary. And here I take you back, Lee, to something which you're very familiar with, which is taxation in California. You might remember back in 2012, we had a temporary tax increase on the ballot. I think it was Proposition 30, Lee, which raised the upper brackets of California. And it was a temporary tax increase to last only 4 years to get us through a very bad budget situation. What happened in 2016, Lee? Proposition 55 goes on the ballot to extend the temporary tax increase through 2028. What's going to happen in 2030, Lee? There'll be yet another extension of that temporary tax increase. Long story short, it's here to stay. So you look at Proposition 30 and the idea that this is only a temporary change to how we do redistricting in California, that once we get into the next decade with a new census and Donald Trump out of the way, that will go back to the independent commission. But Lee, what's going to happen if this thing passes? What's going to happen to those 5 Democrats who are now sitting in office? Are the Democratic powers that be going to say, bye-bye, thanks for doing this, but the independent people are going to now drive you out of office? I'm not sure. So I'm willing to cynically bet you that come 2030, or 2032, especially if, say, J.D. Vance is in the White House, and so he can argue the MAGA revolution continues, that California Democrats will come up with a rather flimsy argument. They'll say, well, look, at redistricting is going on all over the country right now. Republicans are playing hardball. The same logic is now we have to do this to counter what they're doing. I think you could probably wave bye-bye to the Independent Redistricting Commission altogether. I would not be surprised at all. So buyer beware about the word temporary on this fix. The other thing which I would point out here, forgive the rant, some of the advertising on both sides here is just really silly or outrageous. Choose your word here. The no side talks about how voting for this is a vote for open borders. That's a really pretty wild stretch if you're somehow suggesting that voting for this, which increases the Democrats' chance of getting in the House, is somehow going to return us to open borders. I think not. Donald Trump's still in office, so really kind of a false argument. But on the yes side, what do they talk about? This protects independent redistricting. What? How does this protect it? How does it fortify it? False ad. So both sides are playing fast and loose here, Lee and Jonathan.
Well, yeah, when you look at the composition of voters within the state, there's still a substantial number with no party preference, and I hope that those in the middle will see through this. And I do share your concerns about the temporary aspect of this. If it does go through, I would bet that for the rest of my lifetime that we would not see the Independent Redistricting Commission come back. The way I look at the electorate, there's probably 1 out of 4 voters. I think that probably where Newsom's rants do resonate with them. If Republicans vote, Republican turnout, if they return their mail ballots, is high, and those in the middle are sufficiently worried about this that they either don't vote or vote no, then I could easily see this going down. But it really kind of boils down to how many are going to send those mail-in ballots back. The cost bill is just extraordinary. The last number I saw was 282 million. And just imagine what we could do for schools, or you name the public policy that we're deficient in, and add in 282 million plus the over 100 million that's been spent on the campaign.
Right. Here's what drives conservatives crazy about the California power establishment. If you read the actual initiative, if you read the ballot argument, what does it say about the cost? A few $1 million. Doesn't get to $200 million, just says
Yeah.
$50 million.
Yeah, it's a little bit I mean, it's technically correct, but is in my opinion, it's misleading.
Completely misleading because the practice is that the state bails out local costs. So this is assuming the state will not bail out local costs. So again, another misleading thing. The other interesting thing here is what's going to happen to Gavin Newsom based on what happens on November the 4th, or if this is California, the month after November 4th is the votes keep getting counted because this thing may not get settled for a few weeks in California fashion. You keep hearing this language about how this is a make or break moment for Gavin Newsom. If he doesn't win this, somehow he is torpedoed as a presidential candidate. How horribly embarrassing, blah, blah, blah. And I think I talked about this on the last podcast. Baloney. He is, you mentioned polls, Lee. He is at the front of the Democratic field right now, based simply on what he's been doing the past few months, just soaking up a lot of oxygen in the Democratic field, fighting against Donald Trump. Now we can talk about how dignified it is, how gubernatorial it is, how statesmanlike a lot of it he's doing right now. But he is singing a tune that Democrats love because they want somebody to fight Donald Trump, even if it's in the same kind of crude manner that Donald Trump likes to practice politics. So here's my theory here. If this thing passes and Gavin Newsom can deliver 5 seats to the House and the Democrats end up getting the House next November, yeah, he's a hero, and that's a tailwind for him. If Gavin Newsom loses in California, the Democrats don't get the 5 seats. I think he still gets credit outside of California for trying. He may get dinged in California for losing. You'll see editorials saying, thanks for a tremendous waste of time. Now focus on your day job. He'll still be in a very powerful position in Sacramento, though, even though he would be wounded. And why is that? It's the same reason why you see groups that normally would oppose Prop 50 backing off it, because you have to deal with an incumbent governor regardless of the outcome. And incumbent governors carry a lot of juice in Sacramento when it comes to getting money spent, bills passed, and so forth. So Lee, I don't see how Newsom really loses here.
No, I agree, Bill. It's there's a sense in which it's a win-win for him.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he's really putting all his eggs in this basket. It also illustrates another aspect of his governorship, which is what would the positive vision that he could run on? He is portraying, he's going to the mat as saying, I'm the guy fighting Trump. I'm the guy fighting MAGAs. I am the person who on Twitter, on X, who is mocking the president, and that's 100% of his plan right now. He is not going on saying, "Here's what I've done for California. Look how much better the schools have become. Look how much better the roads are. Look how much more water conveyance and water storage we have. Look how we have made life better for the median voter in California." And there's none of that. And I think it also highlights where the National Democratic Party is.
Yes.
In terms of, you've got a guy who's a 10-point unfavorable, who seems to be the leading candidate right now. You try to get your head around that. Nationally, there's the Democratic Party and Republican Party are pretty evenly split at about 25 to the low 30s. No party preference, again, is the dominant portion of voters. I don't see anything he's doing right now that's going to resonate with them at the national level. You just have to have not only a vision of what you're going to do for the country, but you have to point to a track record. 20 years ago, you could point to Newsom's track record, I think, as mayor of San Francisco, where you could say, hey, look, I did gay marriage. Look, I put a lot of homeless on buses and sent them home to their families, and actually very few came back. That would be a track record you can point to, but I don't see those accomplishments for him now in his 7th year. We're about a year from the election. Things move here glacially, so I just don't see the potential of him being able to deliver on any of his previous campaign promises, ranging from homelessness to housing, both of which have gotten worse under his watch. So interesting political times.
He is a smart politician. Lee and Jonathan, I can tell you, having worked for a California governor back in the day, when you go from year 7 to year 8, you commission a couple of people to look at the record and you look at everything you promised along the way. So you go back to your first campaign and your second campaign, you look at your state of the state addresses, you look at your budget addresses, you look at promises made and promises kept, plain and simple, and you come up with a tally sheet. And so I'd argue that 2026 for Newsom will be an exercise in trying to check a few of those boxes that have been checked so far. But the other thing which intrigues is Gavin Newsom has a rather chameleon-like approach to politics. And what have we seen in the past year from him? At various points, he has been very conciliatory with Donald Trump, trying to be nice with Donald Trump. And he has gone 180 degrees and been just an absolute Trump basher. He has lately engaged in the issue of disgruntled young men, just feeding off of the Charlie Kirk shooting. And before that, he was doing podcasts with Charlie Cook and Steve Bannon, again, trying to be an open arms guy before going to this current basher form that he's in right now. So now he has discovered the plight of young men, which is very interesting because his wife, the first partner, Jennifer Siebel Newsom, has quite the track record of bashing male toxicity in her documentaries and her body of work. So kind of instant contradiction there, if you will. So the point is, who knows what he gloms on to next? Sure, finger wedding, a lot of it goes on in politics. You look at when Bill Clinton ran for office in 1992, ran for the presidency, a lot of finger wedding there and kind of tasting which way the winds were blowing. But Clinton's smart enough to kind of recognize what it took to get 270 electoral votes. And this is the question with Newsom. For all the attention he's getting, Lee and Jonathan, the bumps in the polls, the talk about being the 2028 nominee and so forth, is he really putting himself in a better position to campaign in purple states, battleground states across America, which Lee ties into what you just said about California. What does his record look like in California? I have this working theory that the 2028 election, if Gavin Newsom is involved, could look very much like the 1988 election, in that you would have a vice president on one side, J.D. Vance playing the role of George H.W. Bush, versus a governor or a former governor, Gavin Newsom in this case playing the role of Michael Dukakis. Newsom is a stronger campaigner on any day than Michael Dukakis, a different personality. But Lee and Jonathan, the approach would be the same for the Republican campaign. You would just deconstruct the home state. And so, whereas the Bush campaign first went after, Massachusetts and Boston Harbor and then went after Willie Horton and things like that, you would see, I think, a very smart Republican campaign pick apart California with homelessness, with poverty, with, the high-speed rail, the notion of government gone bad.
Yeah, Bill, I think it'd almost be like shooting fish in a barrel for the Republicans, particularly Vance as the candidate. He's a very high IQ guy. He's quick. He sees through things. He's a really good debater. And some of it in terms of Newsom's future depends on who else rises in on the Democratic side. If it was somebody like Andy Beshear, that's a candidate who can point to, hey, I'm a Democrat. I'm running Kentucky, and Kentucky's a red state, so I can reach across the aisle. It's not even reaching across the aisle. He says, I can get stuff done that's nonpartisan. People appreciate the way I spend money.
You're trying to present a rational argument to a party that's convinced it's 1935 Redux. We're in Nazi Germany, so sure.
Yeah, and if that's the case, then they're going to lose again.
Speaking of 2020, getting back to the messaging on Prop 50, I see ads with Governor Newsom. I see ads with Senator, maybe gubernatorial candidate Alex Padilla. We'll get to that in a minute. I don't see AOC. I don't see 2028 people showing up here in California. So what did the Romans say about the Mediterranean, Mare Nostrum? This is kind of the Mare Nostrum for Gavin Newsom, my California.
Well, gentlemen, let's talk about wildfires in the state. Lee, you explained in your recent column for California On Your Mind that the Palisades fire, the most destructive fires in Los Angeles County history, left behind a scar that is measured not only in the 50,000 acres burned and 18,000 homes incinerated, but also in the 2.6 million tons of waste those homes became. That mountain of ash has become a nightmare for the Kardashians and every person living in Calabasas, California, about 40 miles northwest of Los Angeles, where debris and ash from the fires have been dumped into a landfill that sits within the community of 23,000 people. Lee, how did Calabasas end up as a proverbial wasteland?
Well, Jonathan, it's interesting. Calabasas has become, I guess, today's version of Beverly Hills or Bel Air. A lot of celebrities who do not want to be in LA proper, but who wish to live in a very nice community have made Calabasas their home. several of the Kardashians, Justin Bieber, Will Smith, John Travolta. And this is a community that has a landfill. The landfill in Calabasas is open for things like ordinary trash, landscape trimmings. If you want to toss used AA batteries in the landfill, no can do. But one day people in the Palisades woke up and they found that the landfill was accepting debris from the Palisades fire, which according to a New York Times story has a lot of, I'll just say, has toxic material within that. And the Calabasas landfill was never intended to be a toxic waste dump. The closest toxic waste dump, as I believe about 175 miles away, is EPA monitored, EPA managed. This is an area where there aren't very many people, if any. That's where that debris should be going, because there is asbestos, there's lead, there's arsenic in that debris. As you'd imagine, coming from the fire that melted, EV batteries and houses that were built long ago that had lead paint, that had other toxic materials. But officials chose not to send that toxic debris to the 175-mile away landfill. They sent it to Calabasas, they sent it to Simi Valley, they sent it to Silmar because it was just much more expeditious. And what was interesting about this is that no matter who you were in Calabasas, whether you were the Kardashians, who I believe know Newsom, some people in Calabasas, I think personally know RFK Jr., who expresses a lot of concerns about environmental issues and in people's health. Nothing really worked for them other than to file a lawsuit. Ultimately, what they wanted to do was to test the debris because, and this is where it gets just heartbreaking, the debris from those fires was not fully tested for toxic materials.
Right.
And if you don't know that it's toxic, then you say, okay, let's put it in the landfill in Simi Valley or Calabasas or Silmar. Well, the people in Calabasas finally prevailed. They were allowed to test it, and voila, Cal Surprise, there were toxic materials in there. Now the issue becomes, well, are we going to dig up those? I think I can't recall whether it was. I think the amount dumped was in the billions of pounds, over 1 billion pounds. So now, what do people in Calabasas do? Do they say, okay, well, let's dig it up and then move it somewhere else? Well, you're going to have all that dust flying around the Calabasas. There are people who are moving out. They're worried about Calabasas potentially becoming a cancer cluster. I would have the same worries if I lived there, and I don't know if I would move or not. But this is just heartbreaking, in my opinion. And just imagine if the private sector did this. If the private sector put into landfill toxic materials, they sort of pretended they didn't know it was toxic. They tried to shut down any pushback from the community. It brings back memories of Aaron Brockovich,
Exactly.
the old movie with Julia Roberts. Well, Aaron Brockovich is a neighbor, Calabasas. Aaron Brockovich took a shot at this, and you might say if Aaron Brockovich can't do it, then no attorney can. So I feel for those people in Calabasas, Silmar, Simi Valley. It seems like their rights were abrogated, and they have no recompense. And this is a government that doesn't seem to be able to protect us from natural disasters, and they don't seem to be able to be willing to protect us from the fallout of that. Even when there were options, such as taking that debris to the EPA toxic waste dump, over 100 miles away. Yes, it would have cost more. Yes, it wouldn't have been cleaned up quite so quickly. But in my opinion, it just really was the wrong thing to do.
Lee, can you explain how the power structure works here? Is this the county government deciding where the waste goes, and the county government therefore trumps the local government? Is there a state government role, or could the state government come in and change the decision?
Well, that's an interesting question. People were trying to figure out, well, how was Calabasas picked? It's close. it's close to the Palisades. It's just over the hills. Some said county government picked it. County government says no, the Army Corps of Engineers picked it. The Army Corps of Engineers said one day we got a sheet of where we're supposed to take this stuff, and Calabasas was on there. So it's again, it's a little bit like hide the pea under the walnut shell. I believe this, I think the state could have intervened. The state government chose not to.
I don't know if you saw it, Lee, but Jonathan, but the LA County Supervisors tasked the McChrystal group. This is General Stanley McChrystal's group to do an after-action report of the fires, and they found the following: that there are, quote, outdated policies, inconsistent practice, and communications vulnerabilities, and they add, quote, the process to communicate an evacuation decision to the public was slow, convoluted, and involved multiple leadership roles across county level departments. What did you say, Lee? Kelsey Priest. My question to you, Lee, is we don't know if Los Angeles will go up in flames. We know that at some point it will go up in flames. Why? It's in a fire zone, plain and simple, just like eventually we'll get an earthquake. Eventually we'll have mudslide problems. This is how the world treats California. But Lee, what do you think would be different about Los Angeles the next time around, other than presumably the mayor will not go off to Ghana if there's going to be trouble?
What will be different? Yeah, there'll be another awful fire. I mean, you just look down the list. Every 5 years or so, there's an awful fire in Los Angeles, and sometimes in Malibu, this time in Palisades, and the Eaton fire in Altadena. And what will be different depends on who's in the mayor's office. If Rick Caruso, who ran as a Democrat, if he'd been elected over Bass, and the polls were getting close. When the election occurred a couple of years ago, Bill, interestingly, Obama, Clinton, Biden, Harris, all came to strongly support Bass, and they came out. Several of them came out. Hillary Clinton came out to do a campaign event with Karen Bass. Rick Caruso, as a Democrat, was persona non grata to them. He was waiting for the fire. He was not in Ghana. He was waiting for the fire at his new Palisades development. He had commissioned private firefighters who had enough time to drive out from Arizona to be in the Palisades when the fire broke out. It all really boils down to leadership. And I think people have not fully appreciated just how awful this was. And the McChrystal report, Bill, which you cite, is damning. County officials are trying to, wallpaper it over. It's obvious there's just a lack of prioritization, and there's a real issue of competence. Bill, I think among the county supervisors, there was one fellow about a year ago who was on either TikTok or Twitter talking about Ho Chi Minh. And the communist leaders, and no, you don't have time in your hands to do that. We have inadequate protection, just grossly inadequate protection. So yeah, it'll happen again, Bill. And if the same kind of people are elected, it'll be the same type of response. And I was looking at the Palisades dashboard, the housing dashboard, of about 7,500, 7,400 structures were destroyed or damaged. Out of those, do you want to take a guess at how many single-family homes have been rebuilt? Or let me rephrase it. At the rate we're permitting rebuilds, do you want to take a guess at how many months it'll take before all of those 7,400, 7,500 homes will be complete?
Go for it, Jonathan. Take a guess.
At the rate we've seen so far in the 9 months. You want to take a guess at how many months? Jonathan, not to put you on the spot, man, but
I can't even begin to guess.
Okay, 25%.
Okay, Bill. If you said 25%, then that would be about 4 years.
Okay.
You want to take another guess?
Okay.
It's much worse.
Okay, 12.5%. Is it over 10%?
If the permitting continued at the rate it has, now there's some good reasons to believe that it will speed up. But if it did continue at the rate it has, I think it would take something like 15 to 20 years.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So one thing the county has become very aggressive with is brush clearance and brush clearance citations. And this story caught my eye the other day because I guess it's kind of a window into the crazy post-fire world that is Los Angeles. So brush clearance citations through Los Angeles is a Reuters story have increased by 37% to 14,840 compared to almost 11,000 in 2024. And Reuters goes on, the increase in citations after news reports of 16,000 acres in, quote, high fire severity zones that required inspection and proposed budget cuts that would lead to the loss of 3 people in the LAFD's brush inspections unit. So here we have these terrible fires, and Los Angeles decides we're going to cut our budget for checking on, inspecting on people's brush, because part of the problem is you have brush around your home. The brush catches fire, makes a bad situation worse. So the county decides to cut back on its inspection units, and then once it's caught cutting back on it, it overcompensates. And what caught my attention was this wonderfully dry quote by somebody who says very upset, a local homeowner who said, quote, sorry your house burned down, but go clear your brush, you're going to be fined $750. So you've lost your home, you're trying to recover, you're trying to go through the charred remains of your home, and along comes Los Angeles is going to nail you with $750 fine if they find brush that they don't like. It kind of reminds me of back when I lived in Washington, D.C., Lee and Jonathan, and occasionally you get blasted with a terrible snowstorm. And then the city of Washington, D.C., the district government would be slow to respond. So about a day or two later, the plows would finally come through. And what would the plows do? The plows would plow the roads and bury cars on the side of the road in snow. And then the cops would come along after that and they'd issue a ticket on your car, which is buried under 3 feet of snow. So this kind of reminds me of that, getting a $750 love note from the city on top of that. And I think now Mayor Bass has apologized for that and said that they won't fine people $750. But Lee, it's just a portrait of a local government that just the right hand doesn't even know what the left hand is doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost Saturday Night Live level silliness. Yeah. Ironically, the LA Fire Department wanted within their budget to staff two full-time units for brush removal in the Palisades. There's a lot of chaparral there, which has substantial oil within it, and therefore it's an inferno waiting to happen. That was declined. That was denied within LA City, 14 billion or whatever it is budget. And you know who was clearing the brush? It was teen volunteers were clearing the brush. And again, this just all goes back to priorities. Government's first priority is to protect. And just within LA is just whether is protecting from the national disaster or dumping toxic filled debris in your backyard, the government, I think, is just failing abysmally.
Yeah, words not said often on this podcast, but maybe Los Angeles needs to look to Sacramento for wisdom in this regard. The state government has the Office of Emergency Services. I know from when I worked in government many, many years ago, OES was always very busy because they're the people like FEMA and the federal government who have to respond to natural disasters. But our OES was always very quick to respond. We had good people running it. And I think if you're the mayor of Los Angeles, that's probably one of the first things you want to do if you want to change this around. Look at what your emergency structure is in LA. Maybe you need to create an OES if there's not one there. And you have to think long and hard about hiring somebody who just can really kind of kick fanny and take names at the top of that, because clearly you're going to be banging a lot of heads around Los Angeles to make the city work.
And Bill, your column this week covers the governor's race, in which there are 18 declared candidates. You examine the chances of former state assemblyman Ian Calderon, a millennial just a month shy of his 40th birthday, who is running as a millennial. You also mentioned Tony Atkins, former president pro tem of the state Senate, who dropped out of the race yesterday. And you also raised the prospect of a wild card in U.S. Senator Alex Padilla. Bill, what does it take to separate yourself and assume position as dominant frontrunner for statewide office?
Well, 18 people in this race, that's not counting Kamala Harris and Lenny Kounalakis, who dropped out of the race. And Lenny Kounalakis is our lieutenant governor. And it's not counting Senator Padilla, who may or may not get in, but he should be making a decision soon. It's the clown car of America's gubernatorial races, not to insult hardworking clowns everywhere by locking them into politicians, but just how many more people can run in this race. My angle with Toni Atkins was this. For those not familiar, she hails from the San Diego area. She is a former Assembly Speaker and State Senate President pro tem. She has a very compelling life story. She grew up very poor in Appalachia. They didn't have indoor plumbing. She was the first person in her family to graduate from college. It's a real kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who grew up under very impoverished conditions in Austria. There's a real kind of bootstraps message here, and she is openly gay. She is the first lesbian president of the Senate, and I think the second lesbian speaker of the Assembly. Yet, if you look at the polls right now in the clown car race, she is sitting anywhere from 1% to 2%. So the question is, what's going on here? I started thinking about this after I read Kamala Harris's book, or I read the excerpts. I don't have the stomach to read the whole thing. 107 Days is the name of the book, by the way. And the big news out of that was that she agonized over whether or not to put Pete Buttigieg on the ticket last year, the transportation secretary, who's also openly gay, but she decided against it. Why? She didn't think that America could stomach a woman of mixed race married to a Jewish man, and then bringing along a gay candidate on top of that. She thought it was too much for America to stomach. So my first thought was, is Toni Atkins' problem that California is just a bastion of homophobia and she can't get anywhere because she's gay? And the answer is no. If you look at where California is on the topic of sexuality right now, we have changed a lot over the last 15 to 20 years. Back in 2008, we had a very contentious ballot measure, Proposition 8, the definition of marriage. It said very simply, marriage is between a man and a woman. And it went on the ballot, a huge fight over it, and it passed. A very bad moment, Lee and Jonathan, for Gavin Newsom, because he was the star in the ads, the star in the no campaign, the yes campaign ads, because remember, Newsom famously came out after a state Supreme Court decision and said, it's coming whether you like it or not. It was kind of Newsom in full throttle obnoxiousness, and it really helped push that thing over the finishing line. You fast forward now to 2024 and the ballot measure Proposition 3, which strikes the Prop 8 language and just says that everyone has a right to be married if they so choose. In other words, it's both hetero and same sex at the same time, and it passes overwhelmingly. California is moving just as politicians are moving. Barack Obama was against gay marriage when he ran in 2008, changed his mind in 2012. Donald Trump, for the whole conservative MAGA agenda, Donald Trump doesn't have any problem with same-sex marriage. He's always kind of dodged. If you look at his administration, he has a gay Treasury Secretary. I think they call them the A-gays in the administration, just gay men and gay women in powerful positions. So getting back to Toni Atkins, is she stuck in that position because of her sexuality? No, she's stuck in that position because of the nature of California governor's races, which are very muscular affairs, Lee or Jonathan. If you have name recognition, and if you have special interest money, and you also have special interest and can turn out the vote, you're in the catbird's position. And right now she lacks the money, and I think she has one labor endorsement, not much in that way. So she's stuck in that 1% to 2% position. And getting back to Alex Padilla, if he jumps in the race, I think like in 2024 when Nancy Pelosi pushed money in Adam Schiff's way in the Senate race, you'll see money pushed in Alex Padilla's race. Why is that? National Democrats hate Katie Porter. Why? She went to Congress and trashed earmarks, was a general pain in the butt to Nancy Pelosi and the powers that be. They don't want her to be California governor. They will back Padilla. And Padilla is buddies with Governor Newsom, who will put his muscle behind that and probably get special interest. So even though Padilla is not very strong in polls right now, I imagine that once he got in, you would see that take off as well. So anyway, it's a lot of rambling on about Toni Atkins, but I'm just very fascinated with the idea that somebody who has a very compelling life story, who would have a very interesting narrative if she became a serious contender, the state's first gay governor, she's not getting anywhere, Lee.
No, Toni Atkins just never had any traction, and it really does boil down to name recognition. She's not known outside her district. I mean, literally no one knows her. And I think she had about $4.2 million for her campaign. That's not going to be enough to go where she needs to go. And I think voters want somebody who's going to do a good job. At the end of the day, they don't care about their sexuality or their political preferences. They just want to know they can get the job done. And that really, I think, highlights just what it seems to me is really just a patronage system now within the Democratic Party within California. It's who gets anointed. I mean, years ago, Gavin Newsom was anointed. Kamala Harris was anointed. It began with Willie Brown. And once you get into the Democratic Party machine within a one-party state, a lot of doors open up. And Kamala Harris went into the Senate, and Gavin Newsom, he tried to run for governor after Schwarzenegger. Jerry Brown decided that he wanted a second shot at it. Newsom bided his time as lieutenant governor. So now we're in a situation where you have a lot of names with almost no recognition, other than there's a little bit of recognition for Katie Porter. And one reason is because she lost in the U.S. Senate race where Adam Schiff won. So people at least know her name. They don't know the names essentially of several of the other candidates. Villaraigosa is running, and yet Villaraigosa is long removed from his days as an LA politician. Bill, what makes me just so disappointed is that I would think that if you wanted to win, you need to take a chance. You need to separate yourself from the other Democrats. None of them have done that. They all de rigueur pledged to take on Donald Trump. They all de rigueur pledged to make the state more affordable, but then they also talk about, well, we're going to preserve the state's bullet train. Which again is, in my opinion, throwing good money after bad. They want to provide undocumented immigrants with Medi-Cal healthcare benefits. And without going into the social, cultural, immigration aspects of that, that is dollars that is going to strain the budget. You have a budget that has risen over 60% since Gavin Newsom entered office, and yet the essentials are not getting done. There's a sense in which they're trying to kind of out-immigrant each other. Tony Thurmond talked about that. I think he's probably also in, I'm guessing, the 3 to 4% range, Bill.
Yep. Yes.
And Xavier Becerra has talked about the importance of immigrants. So I haven't seen anything from the candidates that makes me think that California would fare better under them than they have under Governor Newsom. They all talk about, well, we're going to build more housing. Well, Gavin Newsom said he was going to make housing a Marshall Plan. He's roughly 25% below what his goal was. To put it differently, you look at California housing starts, it really doesn't look any different now than before when Newsom took office, despite all these new laws being passed. Bill, I agree totally with you about Porter. She's not well liked in DC. She has a difficult personality. She taught law at UC Irvine. She comes across, I would say she has a personality of a consumer advocate. Let's fight big business. Let's fight corporations. Let's try to represent the little person when they're getting, messed over by big business interests. That's not what California needs right now. There's nothing wrong with being a consumer advocate, but there's just so many other issues. And she's pledged she would sign SB 79, which is, in my opinion, a terrible housing bill. It would destroy local zoning laws and permit high-density housing within a half a mile of transit stops. So people who invested their life savings in a single-family home, if SB 79 is signed by Newsom, you might have a multi-story housing unit right next to you, and that's not going to move the needle whatsoever in terms of California housing. It's depressing when you look at the dance card on the Democratic side. It's depressing. Bill, there was a recent debate between the candidates, but I don't believe either Republican was part of that, were they?
No, it was a Democratic roadshow. It's interestingly, if you getting back to Ian Calderon and his campaign, as Jonathan mentioned, he turns 40 in October, and he's pushing very hard the whole millennial vibe because he's running against an older field. And actually, if you look up the average of California governors, Jerry Brown was 36 when he was elected in 1974. I mean, he was the oldest elected governor as well. But the average age in recent times is about mid-50s. So it's kind of a sweet spot there. So Calderon is ahead of that. He was ahead of that when he was in the legislature. You know, he was the youngest majority leader in the assembly as well. If when he first got in, he put out a video and pushed very hard on the notion that, you know, I'm young and I get it. People are getting squeezed. They're getting squeezed by bad decisions in Sacramento. That's kind of thumbing the machine, but here's the problem. He's a product of the machine. His father was in the legislature. He has two uncles who are in the legislature. His stepmother is occupying the seat he wants to occupy. So he is Calderon/Kennedy in that regard. And so he's not really an outsider either. So if you're looking for Diogenes, if you're looking for somebody who's going to hold up the candle and lead you down the Capitol and show you what's wrong, I don't think that creature, at least on the Democratic side, is in the field.
You know, Billy, it's interesting when you mentioned Padilla. He's California senior senator. He's made, you know, he's moved the needle a bit. He's had some bills he introduced and passed into law. That would seem to be a really politically risky move for him to become governor of California. When it's not obvious that he would win, I suspect he would if he entered. But oh my God, talk about a thankless job right now.
Well, but figure it this way, Lee. He's in the United States Senate. He's on the minority side. The Democrats are not going to get back the Senate in 2026. The numbers just don't add up. If you look at 2028, it's not much better. And so it's a Republican Senate for the time being. So there he is on the minority side, which means he can't really investigate. He can't really have any showboat moments. What's his big moment as a senator? He's getting put down on the ground and handcuffed when he was trying to crash a FEMA? No, it was a DHS press conference with Kirsty Noem. That's his moment as a senator. You can't really point to any legislative accomplishments. He's kind of a nothing burger in that regard. So why not get out of that job and go become governor for 8 years and see what happens? So I do the move too. I worked for Pete Wilson, who made the same move in 1990. It's part of a larger trend in politics, by the way, where you're seeing senators on both persuasions bailing out early. Joni Ernst in Iowa, she's leaving after 2 terms. If you know the Senate, historically, what happens after as a senator wraps up his or her second term, they go back and figure out how to break their campaign pledge of promising not to serve more than 2 terms, some phony listening tour and so far. But she's had it after 12 years in Washington. Marsha Blackburn, you're seeing her going back to run for governor of Tennessee. So the Senate is not what it used to be, which was centrist and collegial and a bunch of guys hanging out and playing squash and sitting in a sauna talking about the world problems. It's angry, it's partisan. There's a lot of vendetta politics going on back and forth. And so if I were Padilla, I'd probably think about coming back here and running too. The problem, though, Lee, is that I'm not sure if the guy really will be a good governor or not, because again, you got to show me what's he accomplished.
Yeah, the what surprises me is that there's no one on that slate, as far as I can tell, that has absorbed the message from November of last year, that maybe has read Ezra Klein's book and has said, you know what, we do need some new ideas. The status quo has failed miserably, and I'm going to be the guy or the gal to move the needle now.
But again, Lee, the angry beating pulse of the Democratic Party is now turning on Ezra Klein. If you look at what's happening to him on social media, he's getting flamed by Democrats.
Is that right? Is that right? Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I haven't read the book. I read a review of the book written by a guy who knows some economics, and it literally is some prominent Democrats in 2025 rediscovered what Adam Smith had to say about how an economy works back in 1776 in his famous book, The Wealth of Nations.
In a previous incarnation, Gavin Newsom was embracing the abundance agenda, so stay tuned. I think it sounds like Lee and Jonathan that Lee's going to miss Gavin Newsom when he leaves office.
I really hope we don't, because that means we're going to be in bad shape.
Gentlemen, let's cap off this podcast by talking about UCLA football, which I'm sorry to say, Lee, is 0-4. They fired their coach, Deshaun Foster, and they're in danger of going entirely winless this season. A couple of weeks ago in an empty Rose Bowl, they lost by 15 to a New Mexico team. It paid $1.5 million to come to Pasadena. Schools have enlisted accomplished sports and business executives and UCLA grades to find a new coach. Should it follow the Stanford model, it could bring in Andrew Luck, someone like Andrew Luck, to serve as the football's game manager. But the bigger question is, can California public universities play the same game as current powerhouses do with NIL money? You know, you see current state schools like the University of Texas, Ohio State, Texas A&M, and the Oregon Ducks and LSU are all state schools that you know, play a bigger game in the NIL. Ali, why does UCLA have a spending problem?
Yeah, UCLA has a spending problem, and that's on top of our $1.2 billion bill that the Trump administration has delivered to us. You know, we meaning UCLA. I've been there, 25 years. We have just made a lot of bad spending decisions. I believe the athletics department is in deficit to the university by over $100 million. I don't know if that's the exact number, but we have hired many coaches and we have fired many coaches. And when you fire them, there's a buyout contract, or there's a buyout clause within the contract that says, okay, you get fired and we've got to write you several $1 million check. So that's, that's happened for a number of years. UCLA football, probably hasn't been systematically relevant since, since going back to maybe the 1980s or 1990s, believe it or not. We did have a 10-2 season about 10 or 12 years ago, but that was a little bit of an anomaly. So we've hired football coaches, we fired football coaches, we've hired basketball coaches, we fired basketball coaches. We owe them a lot of money. And by gosh, when you pay somebody $1.5 million to come to your home stadium, they're supposed to, I'm saying this facetiously, they're supposed to lay down and lose. I suspect that, if you go on StubHub or one of the ticket platforms, on the day of the UCLA game, you can probably buy tickets for $10. You look at those drone videos of the Rose Bowl, which can hold over 90,000, and I wonder if full paying customers, if there are more than 15,000. We are done in. And Jonathan, we can definitely, state school can definitely play the NIL game. Most of the top football schools now, as you mentioned, you could put Oklahoma in there, Alabama, Georgia, Florida. These are all schools that are state schools, and there's no reason why you can't play the game. But when your athletics department is in deficit over $100 million and the university is facing a $1.2 billion bill from the administration, it's hard to write checks. So I suspect we very well could go winless. That would be very grim for us, but that's certainly possible.
Now, in fairness, UCLA, there could be a bigger Los Angeles story here. USC lost its first game of the year over the weekend to Illinois, and now the powers that be are already looking at Lincoln Riley, their kind of embattled head coach, and thinking if they're going to get rid of him. Those familiar with college football know that Lincoln Riley was very successful at Oklahoma. USC backed up the truck, dumped him in a pile of money, brought him out to California. But if they were to can him, Lee and Jonathan, they're looking at about a $70 million buyout. Some people say 60, but I've seen 70 as well. So ouch, welcome to that. Here's my question for you, Lee, and that's one of the culture of UCLA. One way that you could improve the UCLA's football existence is to put a stadium closer to the students. Good luck getting students to go all the way out to Pasadena to go to a game. Part of the college experience is tailgating and then staggering your way in and out of the stadium. Not so at Pasadena. In fact, there's been talk, I think, about moving UCLA football games to the SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, but there'll still be the same transportation problem. Question for you, Lee. Is there enough space in that very crowded UCLA campus to build a football stadium? Maybe something like what Stanford has, a modest stadium, 50,000 people. But Lee, the culture of UCLA and sports, I don't think it's a football mad school, maybe not a sports mad school. What would happen? How would your fellow faculty members, how would the powers that be react if somebody said, well, we're going to build a football stadium here on the campus?
Yeah, well, Bill, you know what? There's a practice facility on campus for football.
Yeah.
I think it is different now, but for years, do you know how long that practice field was?
No.
80 yards.
Oh gosh.
We didn't even have a practice field that was regulation. Yeah, UCLA has to figure out what it wants to be from a sports standpoint. Way back in the day of, John Wooden and NCAA championship after NCAA championship, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton, and at the same time football with I'll take people way back. There's a fellow named Tommy Prothro. We had a Heisman Trophy winner named Gary Beeben. I've had the pleasure to meet
Jackie
him.
Robinson.
Jackie Robinson. And it was good for UCLA because USC was very strong in sports. UCLA was very strong in sports. They would play each other in football. As a kid growing up in LA, the city literally would shut down on Saturdays. And everybody was tuned into SC UCLA. That's kind of an afterthought now. As I mentioned, you probably have to go back to the days of when Terry Donahue was coaching UCLA, or the days of I was going to say Bob Toledo, but Troy Aikman, when Troy Aikman transferred from Oklahoma to be quarterback, and multiple time Super Bowl winner for the Cowboys. That was 35 years ago. So the students aren't engaged. There needs to be a stadium that you can walk to. In my opinion, that's what is needed for a successful interaction between students and the team. And if you don't have that, I think it becomes somewhat of a sterile experiment, because you look at Alabama or Oklahoma or Texas, and you see the colors, you see the kids are so fired up. You look at those drone video footages of UCLA, and it's just something totally different. We have no room for the 80-yard practice field. There wouldn't be much if it could be done. And if you could build it, in less than 25 years with all the environmental regulations you have to go through. I don't think faculty would be particularly excited about this. The faculty sentiment now, I think, at UCLA is one that's football is not in the top. Football's not in the top of their minds, as it might be at Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, Texas.
So we'll leave the listeners with two questions. Will Prop 50 pass or fail on November the 4th? And will the Bruins have a win by then?
The Bruins having a win, I believe, is much less than the probability of Prop 50 passing. I'm saying no on Prop 50 passing. I think Republicans will turn out en masse to vote against it. I think enough no party preference will vote against it or simply not engage. I'm kind of thinking it's going to be kind of a 52-48 type of outcome. But yeah, the Bruins, we could do 0 and 12. Hate to say it, but that's just the way it is.
The Bruins will still be winless, and I think Prop 50 will pass, but narrowly after a couple of weeks of vote counting, which will add to the general frustration of the California public. Why does it take so long to count votes?
We're the most technologically advanced state and the most technologically advanced country, and somehow it takes 2 weeks to count votes. Go figure.
As always, gentlemen, this has been an interesting hour of timely analysis. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Fun, fellas. We never run out of topics, sadly, to talk about in California.
You've been listening to Matters of Policy and Politics, the Hoover Institution podcast devoted to governance and balance of power here in America and around the free world. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you might hear it. And if you don't mind, please spread the word. Get your friends to have a listen. The Hoover Institution has Facebook, Instagram, and X feeds. Our X handle is @HooverInst. That's @HooverInst. Bill Whalen is on X. His handle is @BillWhalenCA. And Lee Ohanian is also on X. His handle is @Lee_Ohanian. Please visit the Hoover website at hoover.org and sign up for the Hoover Daily Report, where you can access the latest scholarship and analysis from our fellows. Also check out California on Your Mind, but where Bill Whalen and Lee Ohanian frequently write. Again, this is Jonathan Mavroidis sitting in Bill Whalen's chair this week. He'll be back for another episode of Matters of Policy and Politics. Thank you for listening.
This podcast is a production of the Hoover Institution, where we generate and promote ideas advancing freedom. For more information about our work, to hear more of our podcasts, or view our video content, please visit hoover.org.